Okay, so it's Rosh Chodesh, it's Chanukah, and it's New Year's Eve. It's a lot of different things at once. What I wanted, so actually, because it's always nice that we should do an Inyan of Chanukah, but this actually works beautifully with what we just finished in Sefer Shoftim. We just did the story of Yael Eshes Chever Hakeni, and the story of Yael, how she took matters into her own hands, quite literally, and she drove the tent peg quite graphically into the head of Sisera, and the female heroine, and there's actually two in the story because of Devorah as well, really quite pronounced. So when it comes to Hanukkah, the question is are women obligated in lighting the Hanukkah menorah?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, so why wouldn't? So let's do the other. Why wouldn't you think so?
Because of the time thing.
Right. So it's we say. Right. So we say that because usually any mitzvah that has a specific time orientation to it, a mitzvah says has man grama, and even though you'll say, okay, this is only Rabbanon, it's a rabbinic mitzvah, it's not a Torah obligation, it's Chanukah in the Torah, but anything that's a time-oriented mitzvah, we say nashim paturas, women are not obligated. However, the Gemara says that there are exceptions to this rule, and one of them is Purim, one of them is Pesach, and one of them is Chanukah, because and the Gemara uses the same language. It says, Af hein hayu ba'osa hanes. That's the language of the Gemara. She'afhein hayu ba'osa hanes, that they too, meaning the women population, were also part of the miracles. But what does that mean? Part of the miracle. I mean, we're all part of the miracle. We're part of the saved. So what Rashi and Tosfos and others in the Gemara, they say that, no, more specifically that they were because of the action of specific women, a direct contribution towards the miracle taking place. Miracles don't happen out of nowhere. We have to do something to make a miracle. So Purim is pretty easy to figure out. Because of Esther. Esther is the miracle of Purim. Pesach, so we say Biglal Nashim Tzedkanios, that the women who were very righteous, and it was Miriam and Yocheved and the midwives and the thing and the children, and millions of them. I always say, if you look in Rabbi Sax's Haggadah, in the essay part, there's the Haggadah part and the other half has the essay part. In the essay part, he has a beautiful essay about the righteous women of the Exodus. Really, really a beautiful like mini shiur there. It's a beautiful article there. So the question is Chanukah. Who are the righteous women of Chanukah? So Rashi makes an allusion. He says, because of that one woman, and it's found in different sort of quasi-midrashic literature. Many of the Rishonim bring the story of someone named Yehudit. You heard the story of Yehudit? Okay, Judith, right? Yehudis. We say Yehudis. Yehudit. So I want to share with you this piece. We're going to read it together. I'll put it up on the screen in a second. And this comes from Rav Rimon's Sefer on Chanukah, which is any Sefer that he publishes is just, like above and beyond incredible, amazing. The layout, the charts, the content. He puts biographies in here, and he has a little divrei Torah in here. This is a halacha Sefer, but you have lots there. So let me share my screen. In this new layout, I have to do.
Coming in
one-on-one.
No, we have a lot of people on Zoom. I got hundreds of people on Zoom.
I'm not coming because it's far beyond my.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised, Debbie.
I'm doing this party too.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you see it on the screen now,
Yeah.
Lars? Okay. I know. I'll try and make it a little bigger. Okay. So we have this episode of Yehudit. So I'll just read you the introduction here. And he says, Maaseh Yehudit shehiz karnu. Okay. It's right up on top here. This story of Yehudit, which we're going to tell, is found in many Rishonim. So Rishonim is the Torah sages of the Middle Ages. So when you think of Rashi, Ramban, Rambam, Ibn Ezra, all that period, 1100s, 1000s, 11, 12, 13, those are all the Rishonim. And Yesh Girsos Rabos L'Masa Zeh, there are many different versions of this story. The Kan Havenu as Girsasel Shel HaRav Hirschler. He brings Rav Hirschler. Rav Hirschler was one of the he published, let's say, the Ramban commentary on the Gemara and other places with like super annotated footnotes. He really, the kind of took us into like a life's work to we have many of the Rishonim, we have now these much better versions that come out over time, in which we have a lot of sources and they correct a lot of the mistakes. Sometimes there are printing mistakes. Sometimes they have cross-referencing. So it's really, we're quite advanced. So he quotes from here, and he says, Royal Tzayin, and he said it's interesting. He says we should point out Ki haben Ish Chai, the Ben Ish Chai, which is from a Sephardic background, Kosev Shemaisa Zeh Hisrachesh Kama Shana Lifnei Neis Chanukah. That when we associate with Chanukah, but this episode actually happened long before Chanukah. Ach mekivan shu haya chelik me'ma'avak be'yavanim u'b'gzerosei mitzaynim esanes hazeh b'Chanukah. But it directly contributes towards the story of Chanukah. So even though it's not a Chanukah story per se, but it's very much Chanukah related, and as a result of what it contributes to the Chanukah story. Okay, so here we go. So he has this. It's a 2-page thing. We're gonna read through it, and it's really very interesting. And then you'll see why it's so similar and why it actually, like, as I said in the note this morning, it dovetails beautifully with what we've been learning in the story of Yael and Sisera. So Tana Rabbanan. Here's the teaching of the rabbis. Bimei Malchus Yavan HaRisha'ah Gazru Shmad Al Yisrael Shelo Ya'asku B'Torah. So we know that during the period of the Greek domination, the Greek Hellenists, and they made Gzera Shmad. Shmad, when we say Shmad, Shmad means a religious persecution. That, they didn't want to kill the Jews. They were very clear about that. They just wanted to kill Judaism. Okay? So part of the Shmad was Shelo Ya'asku B'Torah, that they shouldn't study Torah. So Me'asu Yisrael, Hayoskim B'Tzina. So what happens when you tell people not to do stuff? They do it. They learned in private. They learned secretly. Whatever you tell us not to do, we'll find a way to do it. All right, it's a surefire way to get someone to do something. Va'od Gazru, and they further decreed Shekol Mi Sheyesh Lo Shor Yichtov Al Karno She'ein L'Son Yisrael Chelik B'Elokei Yisrael. Anybody who had an ox should write on the horns that the enemies of Israel have no portion in the God of Israel. So the Jews went and they sold their oxen. They said that you shouldn't do bris milah. They shouldn't keep the laws of nida. So rather than not keep the laws of nida, it says that they actually just separated from their wives. This was a tough one. That anybody who was getting married, so a young girl getting married, before she was to get married, and they had to go through the state to register the marriage or whatever, they couldn't necessarily hide it. But any woman who was about to be married had to have relations with the hegemon, right? You heard of like hegemonia. To look up the word, it's actually the Gemara in Ksubis, in the very beginning of the Gemara Ksubis, and it says that's the reason why Besula Nises L'Yom HaRavi'i, that they would get married, getting ready for Wednesday, and they say that one of this is because of this, because they were worried about the hegemon, and then he would come to town. Let's say let's call him the sheriff in town. Whoever was in charge of that specific district, then his part of his decree was, okay, that he would have every young woman first before she got married, and only then could she go back to her husband. So that's not going to go over very well in our community. Not a good thing. Okay, I think we can agree. Okay. V'nohugu b'davar hazeh shalosh shonim u'shmona chadashim. So here the accounting says that this decree was in place for 3 years and 8 months. And Hashem made a miracle that somehow they worked it out that not a single girl fell into this trap. That's the Gemara in Ksubas in the beginning. They figured out ways around it. We're good at finding ways of doing things quietly. We're also good at finding ways around things. Jews are very, very good at that. Okay, for better and for worse. Okay. Ad shenises bito shel Yochanan Kohen Gadol. So now we have Yochanan, who's the Kohen Gadol. Okay, Yochanan the Kohen Gadol has a daughter, and his daughter is now getting married. So whereas they could, let's say, hide a wedding, do a secret wedding, and when the hegemon comes, they say, "What do you mean? No, she's married already. She's been married for a long time." However, because he was such a public figure, and he was such a well-known individual, they couldn't hide it. So what were they going to do? So the king heard about that the Kohen Gadol's daughter is getting married, so he sends the Hegmon to find this girl and have relations with her. So I just want to just look up the word. Yeah, that's the word, the definition of Hegmon by the Free Dictionary, which is obviously, it's on the internet and it's free, so it's obviously true. A high-ranking Christian cleric in modern churches, usually in charge of a diocese, and in some churches regarded as having received the highest ordination in unbroken succession from the apostles. Okay, it can also be a miter-shaped chess piece that can move diagonally across any number of unoccupied spaces, or it can also be mulled port spiced with oranges, sugar, and cloves. So I don't think we're talking about that. But yeah, but anyways, it could be a religious figure. It was a powerful figure, and the king himself sends the Hegmon, okay, here's your chance. This is a wedding they can't hide. This is one way. So go get this girl. So Amra, so she says, Imani holeches achshav etzel oso Adel, Yifgom osiv yom rabbanos Yisrael v'chi anachnu tovos b'bitur shel chashmonai v'nimtza shem shemai mischalel al yodai. She says, if I'm going to go, it's Arel. It's like, if I go on this heathen, and what's going to happen? He's going to have his way with me. So what's everybody else going to say? They're going to say, what? I am better. We're better than the daughter of the Chash. Again, this is the Chasmonians. This is the Kohen Gadol and the Kohen family, Matasio, the Maccabees, etc. They all come from this family. B'mei Matisyahu ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Yuvanav, we say in Alanisim. Okay, so you're talking about Matasyahu's sister, right? This is Matasyahu's sister, certainly. And what's going to happen is going to cause a great chilul Hashem if I allow this to happen. So Me'asta, so what did she do? Havshita big day tachshiteha, v'lavsha smartutin. She took off her fancy like wedding clothing, or her regal clothing, or her daughter of Kohen Gadol clothing, whatever it is. She put on smartut. Smartut is a rag. She puts on from shmatas. V'natla kos v'kitan shel yain v'yada. She takes a cup and a thing of wine. V'haisa mashke lefnei hamesiba. And before this was going to happen, she drinks. Because shaha yisol ronosa hayu misbaishin v'kovshin b'nei bekarka. And when everybody saw her like this, they were embarrassed and they put their heads in the ground. They would say, "Bito shel Kohen Gadol, mata asi." This is how the daughter of the Kohen Gadol. What should we do? And the parents are embarrassed. Mimi, okay, and Mr. and Mrs. Kohen Gadol are somewhat, taken aback by this. Miyad Herima Kol B'Chia, right away she lifts her voice and with tears and crying. V'amar lahen, she says, no. Eat tzadikim b'nei tzadikim, chasidim b'nei chasidim, atem isbayish mimeni b'nei shalavashti smartutin. She says, you're such righteous people. You're such tzadikim, chasidim. You're embarrassed from me because I put on shmatas. V'ein atem isbayish ma'kadosh baruch hu, but you're not embarrassed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from God. Shatem rotzim limsar osibiyad arel v'tamei l'tamei oseh, and you're ready to hand me over to this. In other words, your priorities are all wrong. You get so upset because of the way I look or the way I act. But what about what's going to happen to me? Where's the outrage there? Right? It's kind of like the way the world is with Israel. We have selective outrage. We only get angry if it's Jew. If it's not Jewish, it's not news. Okay. So Kivin sheshama Yehuda v'chavei Rav Kach. So Yehuda, again, this is part of the mishpacha. She's Ben Yochanan. She's Bas Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Matasyahu is Ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol, and Matasyahu has his 5 sons, Yehuda, right? And one of them. So I always like mentioning this because it's just a fun piece of trivia, and it's the Israeli tour guide in me. Every rabbi is a frustrated Israeli tour guide, as you know. So in the Gush block, in Gush Etzion, in 1979, they founded a new town. It was called Elazar. Elazar, which is right by Derech HaAvot. They have the old mikveh there, and they have this thing. So the legend has it that Elazar was killed there. Remember the story that he was killed by the elephant. and the Greeks and the Syrians, they brought in their elephants, and they never seen it, but he was battling the elephant, and he was squashed by the elephant right there. So that's why they named the town Elazar, 1979. Okay. Anyway, so when you go, you'll see it's right next to Alon Shvut. It's next to Neve Daniel. Neve Daniel, also, if you go to Neve Daniel, I was actually there a couple of weeks ago. They have this big platform outlook because it's very high over there. That's why they get snow. In Gush and in Beit Shemesh, it's very high. So if it snows, it reaches there before it gets any lower. It doesn't reach anywhere else. So in the Neve Daniel, they have this platform, and it's like 1,000, however many meters up, and you have a beautiful view. You could see all the way through Jordan. You could see all the way to Yerushalayim. And many people there are convinced that that's the spot that when it says that Avraham was with Yitzchak on the way to the Akedah, and it says Vayaris hamakom rechok, that he walks, that because he's coming up from the south, and he sees the place from afar, and then he tells the two lads, "You stay here, we're going to go." So they're convinced, like, and you can, by the way, you could see Yerushalayim. You could on a clear day, you could see Har Habayit. So it's pretty interesting. Anyway, Yehuda hears this, and he's like, "Okay, we have to figure out how we're going to kill the Hegmon." Miyad helbishu nara bilvush malchus. So right away they dress her up in regal clothing, the bride. V'asu chuppah shel hadas mibeis chashmonai ad beiso shel Hegmon, and they make a chuppah and they have a procession, and it's out of hadassim, out of myrtle branches, and they have it already from their house all the way till the castle of the Hegmon, wherever he was. Uban kobale novel v'chinar zemer, and they had a 96-piece orchestra, and they're all playing. And they're dancing and they're singing and they're playing until they get to the house of the Hegmon. So Kivan Sheshama HaHegmon came. So soon as the Hegmon, he hears this, Omer l'sarava avadav v'ru asam shahem agdol yisrael mizer Aaron HaKohen. Ooh, wow. Look at this. These are the big knackers. They're from the direct descendants of Aaron HaKohen. So even the non-Jews back then were firmer than now. They knew what was what. Look how happy they are to do my will. They should get a great honor. He's really thinking like that because they made the parade all the way to his house. Like, oh, they're going to do this b'simcha. We're not going to do it begrudgingly. We're going to do it b'simcha. Sarava Avadav, and he says, okay, let's take out all the servants and all the officers, get them out. V'nichnas Yehuda v'chaverav im achoso etzel Hegmon. V'chatchu rosho ubazazo kol asher lo. And Yehuda and his friends, they went with their sister, and they took the bride by the Hegmon, and they cut off his head, and they plundered everything that he had. V'hargu sarav avadav v'darso yavanim ad gemira chutz meikar hamalchus, and they killed all of his officers and all of his servants, and they chased out and stamped out all the Yavanim all the way from that kingship. In other words, they took upon themselves, because of her musar, they took upon themselves to have the gumption to fight back. Up until now, they accepted all these Gezerah Shema. They were just, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Because they weren't actually trying to kill us. They're just like, hey, don't do Rosh Chodesh, don't do a bris here, don't do Shabbos. We'll figure it out. But now they actually were fighting back. V'Yisrael shehayu ba'ir. So the Jews who were in the town, hayu bereses ubera'ad b'shvil osam b'chorei Yisrael. So now they're afraid. Okay, you poke the bear, you'll get away with it once, but now they're going to just send in who knows how many more people to really take care of us. So because of the actions of these Maccabees, these Chashmonaim, they got scared. So Yotza Baskal v'Amra, Natzchu Talia de Ozlam Eved Karba ba'Antuchia. They said, a Baskal heavenly comes out and says, no, they were victorious. And they took the head of Antioch. And those Bachrim, they closed the gates and they repented and they studied Torah and they did acts of kindness. Okay. Now that's part one. So Kivan Sheshemo, Kivan Sheshema Melach Yevanim, Shehargo Yisrael Hegmon Shila. Now this is going to get back to them. Okay. So he heard that he killed my Hegmon, you killed my governor, whatever term you want to use. So Kavatz Kolamo, he gathers his whole nation, Ubalafne Yerushalayim, Vehevi Yosam Mimatzur. Now they bring a big force with them to, they have a siege on Jerusalem. V'nifchadu ma'ora Yehudim. And the Jews, of course, were very afraid of the impending attack that's coming. Ve'asu tshuva shalema, and they repented. V'haisa sham isha almana. And there was one widow there, Yehudit Shema, and she was named Yehudit. V'lakcha shivchasa, v'halcha etzel shara Yushalayim, v'amru hanicha osil etzeis shema yaseh hamakom nes al yadi. She takes her shivcha, and she goes to the gates of Jerusalem, and she says, let me go out. The city's under siege. Let me go out. Maybe a miracle. She's like, maybe I have nothing to lose, but maybe the miracle will happen through my hands. Upaschula v'yatza. They open up the doors, and she goes out. V'halcha lefnei hamelech, and she goes to the king himself. V'yomer la, ma tavakshi? He's like, what do you want? I mean, that's some chutzpah. You have some guts. You have some gumption. V'amra Adoni, bas gedola mi Yisrael anochi, v'achai neviim v'shemati shayi mistam shemacharti pol Yerushalayim biyadecha. She says, my master, I am the daughter of great people in Israel. My brothers are prophets, and I heard them prophesying that tomorrow Jerusalem is going to fall into your hands. Kivan sheshamakach samach simcha gedola. As soon as she heard this, she rejoiced. The king rejoices. He's like, these guys are very easily fooled, I guess. However, one of his necromancers, wisdom, soothsayers, whatever you want to call them, but he looks in the stars. He's an astrologist, and he says, I see that the Jewish people are repenting, and when they repent, you can't touch them. You're not going to be able to overcome them. He says, go back to your place. Don't come here about Jerusalem. Don't come near Israel. And the king does not like being told that he's not going to win, and the king does not being told what to do, and he does not like being told to retreat. So he commands. So what do you do when you're told something you don't want to do? Instead of listening, you just get rid of the person who told you. So he says, we have to take care of this guy. They're going to kill him. They're going to tie his hands and his legs on a tree near Jerusalem. They hang him up and they say, okay, when Jerusalem falls into our hands, then we'll kill him, or let's kill him then. Like, let him watch in such agony. Okay. By the way, this is a very long accounting, especially when it's found in it's not in a medrash. It seems almost medrash-like, but it's found in the Rishonim. When the Rishonim would tell a story like this, again, there are many different versions. This is the one we're going to stick with for now. But it's very interesting how they like schlep out the whole story. It's like a whole thing. And this is like the lesser glorious part of Chanukah that they talk about. Just like on Purim, there's certain parts we don't talk about, or certain parts of the Chumash that we don't teach kids. So this you could throw this all in that category. So V'haya HaMelech ma'amin la'osa Yehudit. So he loves this girl. I mean, what can I say? And he's like, you know what? I like what you have to say. What do you say you and I get together? You want to get married? And she says, my king, I'm not, who am I? I'm not worthy even for one of your servants. Ta'avir cruz b'chol ha'machaneh shekol mi sheyiresh shtei nashim halchos eitzel ha'mayan al yifka behen lefi shehetzricha ani laila l'sham l'chotz atzmi v'litfol. So she says, okay, here's what you're going to do. If this is what you want, if this is what your heart wants, send a message throughout the entire camp that if you see two women that are walking by the spring, by the body of water, don't touch them, leave them alone, because I have to go there and I have to bathe and I have to go to the mikvah and I have to purify myself if I'm going to be in this. So miyad ha'aviru ha'karuz v'asakach. So the announcement goes out. V'asa melech mishta gadol v'shasa v'nishkaru. No girl is touched. Everybody's left alone. He makes a big party. He drinks, he becomes drunk. V'achar kach halchu kol echad ve'echad lo'alav. V'hamelach yashav b'cheika v'yashen. And after the party, this is ostensibly some sort of wedding feast. Everybody goes to they go home, they go to their tent, and the king is sitting b'cheika in her bosom, and she's holding him. V'yashen, he falls asleep. V'holcha osa Yehudis v'nat l'sayev shalo. V'chatcha rosho pashtas sadin alav. And then Yehudit, she took out her, see again, this is the Yael Eishes HaChever HaKeni, it's a story all over again. And she cuts his head off, and then she covers it with a sheet. V'holcha im rosho shel hamelach. And she's walking around with the king's head in a sheet. Okay. V'lo haya reshus l'adam l'daber lahen mitovad ra sheken tziva hamelach mehamayin hocho. Right? It's like nobody's, because since the king put a ban, nobody could speak, nobody's going near the water. Okay. So she went with the king's head, Eitzel Shari Shalim. She goes to the gates of Jerusalem, the Amrad, she says, Pischali HaSha'arim, Shkfar Asa Kadosh Baruch Hu Neis Aldi. The Jews who were hiding inside in the siege in the city, open the gates because Hashem has made a nace for me, has made a miracle. Amrullah, they said to her, Lo Dayach She Zanisa Vikalkalta El Shabasa Ba'alila Imanu. It's bad enough that you went and they accused her. They said, you're Mazana with this man. You had relations with this king, and now you're going to come and you're going to make fun of us? So what did she do? Miyad Harem Lehem Rosh Shalamelech. So like in one of these movies, like she uncovers the sheet. And she's of course holding it by its hair, holding up the head, the severed head. I'm sick just thinking about it. And they showed it to the one guy who told him to run away, and he's hanging on the tree all night waiting for Jerusalem to fall. And he's like, yeah, it's true. Kivin shira'uhu, when they saw it, paschu sha'aram v'yatzu v'herimu kol, they opened the gates and they raised the voice and said, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So how does this story end? Kivan sheshama Yevanim kach Amru. So as soon as the Hellenists, when the Greeks heard this, they said, L'machras b'ayim aleinu, tomorrow they're going to come for us. V'holchu l'melech, and they go to the king's tent. They found the king, however, mutzo below rosh. They found the king, but they just didn't find his head. They found the king's body. They could see his whole regal wear, whatever he's wearing. And they become totally terrified and they run away. And the Jews chased after them. And killed many of them. And he who did miracles for our forefathers should do for us now. So too Hashem will make miracles for us against our enemies, and will come and save us for all time. So this is the version that Rav Rimon puts in the Sefer again. This is from Rav Hirschler from this. Now this is slightly, if not entirely different from the traditional version of the Yehudit story. And I'll tell you why. The traditional Yehudit story says, yes, that she was the daughter of the Kohen Gadol, and that, yes, she was summoned to the Hegmon. That part everybody agrees upon. But in this story, there was someone else who fought against it and caused the Maccabim to fight back. In the regular story, Yehudit is the one who actually, she wasn't, here I have her as a widow. That no, she was a basula, that she was unmarried, she was about to be married, and they couldn't hide it. And she was called to the Hegmon. And there's also not much mention that there was a miracle that no one ever got called to the Hegmon. That's seems to be a new addition in this part of the story. But she gets called, and what does she do? She feeds him milk. She feeds him cheese. She gets him all groggy, and then she cuts his head off. And then she shows them. And it is because of her bravery. That's why in the beginning it says that from the Ben Ish Chai that this happened long before the story of the Chashmonai. But as a result of her actions, if she's Matisyahu's sister, then Matisyahu's children, when the Yevanim come to Modi'in and they want to instill their decrees against the Jewish people, instead of just taking it, they fight back. And where did they get it from? They got it from the heroism of their aunt, Yehudit. But it's because, so why is that little knetch important? Because we know that the halacha tells us that there's a very, very strong custom that on Chanukah we eat dairy foods. Right? Have you heard this custom? No? There's a custom, a very strong custom, to dafka eat dairy on There's no mitzvah to have a seuda on Chanukah. It's not like Purim. It's not like Yontif. But if we're going to have a meal, they say, but there's two things that we say we're supposed to eat. Oily foods. That's where we come with sufganiot and livivot. Latkes and sufganiot, jelly. Now, it used to be just jelly donuts. Now, if you go to like any kosher store, like $14 a piece donuts, it's like, oh my God. I personally, I have trouble. I go straight to my hips, so it's not good for me. A lot of sugar, but also the other is to eat dairy. So maybe it could be that's where they come with latkes and sour cream. I am more of an applesauce on latkes kind of person. I mean, I don't eat dairy anyway. I can't have any dairy, but applesauce. But this whole thing of eating dairy, dafka, cheese, this and that, that's the story of Yehudit, and that's why the Gemara says. So the language of let me just pull up this Gemara. Where's that Gemara? It's Gemara in Psachim. So the Gemara says, this is a Gemara in Arvei Psachim, and it says, Nashim chayavas ba'arba kosos, that women are obligated to drink the 4 cups of wine, sha'afhein hayu ba'osanes, because they were part of the miracle. So Rashi here says, and it's also in the Rashbam, the Amrim of Maseches Sota, the Gemara in Sota says, "B'schar nashim tzidkaniya shehosim osan hador nigalu." The women, the righteous women of that generation, that's why they merited to have exile, to leave Egypt. Mikra Megillah, because of Mishum Yester, and it says Gabe Chanukah. It says Omar. It says V'chein Gabe Chanukah, and it just says, and also regarding Chanukah. V'chein Gabe Ner Chanukah, and he says also that we have in this and that, and Rashi says, the Tosfos says, he quotes this Rashbam, Megillah Esther, Uv'Chanukah al Yedei Yehudit. He just says that one word, al Yedei Yehudit. So we have this Yehudit is mentioned kind of like in a fleeting fashion, and that's why the rest of the Rishonim take off, and they say, well, where do we have the source of the story? So I wanted to share with you the source of the story, but it's actually quite beautiful because we just learned a story. It's a perfect segue. We just learned a story about a heroic woman who also seduced the commander, the leader, the one who's in charge of them, who's wanted to kill them, and she takes matter into her own hands, and she does away with him. And here also, instead of and so the Gemara in Ksubis discusses whether the normally speaking, you're not required to if someone forces you to violate an avera, you're not required to give up your life. So if someone holds a gun to your head and says, "Here, you have to eat a cheeseburger," basar b'chalav, so you don't have to give up your life for that. As a matter of fact, there's even a machlokas, there's a dispute in the Rishonim whether or not you can make a bracha. You might have to make a bracha because however, there are 3 exceptions to that, and it's called the big 3. So if someone holds a gun to you and says, "I want you to murder someone, I'm going to murder you," you can't do it. Worship idols, or I'm going to murder you, can't do it. Or gili arayos, have a forbidden relationship. You got to take one for the team. There's nothing you could do. So there's a whole question: is like, were they required to give up their lives? And then what leads that into the conversation is the Gemara says, "What about Esther? Esther, how is she allowed to live?"
The question is, what is a forbidden relationship?
Okay, so like a forbidden sexual relationship, right? So that's pretty well spelled out. And also according to the Gemara that maybe Esther was married. So any extramarital relationship.
Family.
We know the brother, sister, right? But also
unmarried?
No, so not unmarried. Unmarried is not in the same category, but let's say one part, let's say she is married. So the Gemara has an opinion that Esther actually was married to Mordechai, believe it or not. But let's say it would be that, but how is she allowed? The Gemara says, how is she allowed to be with the king? And then not only that, they said, and yes, you don't have to give up. But if it's in the time of Shmad, if it's Befarhesia, if let's say they gather everybody together and they say, you have to eat pork or I'm going to kill you, then you have to give up your life because of the Farhesia element, because of the public desecration element. And it says, the Gemara says, Esther Befarhesia Havai. She was clearly, everybody knew. Everybody knew what's going on. Like, so that's the whole conversation. But again, so it's interesting that we have this, we have a little nugget of a word that's found in the Rishonim, and it brings us to all these interesting midrashic interpretations. And that leads to a very important halachic principle that's why women have to take part in the mitzvah of Chanukah, of lighting the menorah, etc. For Ashkenazim, women light their own menorahs until they're married. Sephardim women never get to do anything on their own because it's just kind of the way Sephardim roll. But so our custom generally speaking, unless you have specific custom otherwise. But Ashkenazim, that like until you're married, you light a menorah. When you're married, your husband lights together with you or lights for you. But the mitzvah then and the minhag of eating dairy. So again, it all stems from this one thing, and it's part of a larger corpus of halacha of afhein ayibos hanes, specific inclusion of women in the mitzvahs and obligation of the mitzvah. Now you can get into like some of the halacha calisthenics. Now, does that mean that a woman has the same level of obligation as a man? What's the difference? Well, let's say, can a woman light the menorah for a man? Can a man be yotze with a? So again, that's machlokas. It depends, but I just thought that would be it's a nice way to have our shir on Chanukah, on Rosh Chodesh, on Erev New Year's. So we will, Mir Hashem, we'll see everybody next year. But I'm on a bit of a travel schedule now. So I'm in Israel. I'm leaving for Israel after Shabbos. I'm running an APAC trip for rabbinic students. God help me, and then it's the Shiva break. So whatever. I'll let everybody know when we convene. But if not, we could just watch reruns. No. Anyway, Chag Sameach, everyone, and for those who are watching this afterwards, also Chag Sameach. You also get a Chag Sameach, even if you're watching it afterwards. So, and Chodesh Tov. Okay, take care. Stay warm.
Amen.